Hi, Matthew.
Hey.
I'm just jumping right in.
That's fine.
Welcome, everybody who's listening and watching to another episode of Dance to the Music. This is episode number 12, which means this is a whole full year of a podcast. Yay!
Podcast clap.
Oh, yeah, very, very little. My guest, excuse me, today is Matthew Law. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to tracking out here. And let's get started. How you feeling?
I'm good.
On a
Thanks
Saturday, on a record store day, which I don't even know if that's a thing for you. Are you doing anything?
I'm not doing any events for Record Store Day, but I might be wrong, but like, isn't there like 4 or 5 record store days at this point a year or something?
You know
like
what?
That?
It feels like it for sure.
That's for sure. Or I just, time just doesn't make sense anymore or something. But,
for sure.
No, I didn't even see what was like any special releases this time around.
Okay. Neither do I. I was just like, I just remembered earlier.
No, I used to like check it out all the time, but it kind of became like a Bandcamp Friday thing where like,
I was just gonna say
at the same time and everybo's doing releases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So. Just a regular schmegler Saturday for you.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a nice Saturday. It's beautiful.
Okay, cool. So I know you've been living in New York for a little bit now, for a couple of years, but you're originally from Philly.
Yep.
And we do have a mutual Philly connection.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how you grew up, all the little things until no, don't have to give me all the details, but just like, your upbringing in Philly, how it influenced you and all the good stuff.
For sure. So I'm from West Philly proper, like kind of what is now University City, like, the UPenn is kind of pushed into my part of where I grew up. But yeah, I mean, West Philly in the 90s and the 2000s, very special, very diverse community. A lot of people kind of make comparisons and say like, oh, like West Philly is the closest you get to like Fort Greene during like, it's very, because most of like what people know about Philly is like north or south. All the major train lines run north and south.
Mm-hmm.
But this sounds very regional, but like we still have a trolley line, and that goes to West Philly, and I mean, diverse music community, diverse visual arts community. Grew up involved in both.
Mm-hmm.
Played violin when I was younger and all this stuff, and a little bit of drums, a little bit of guitar. Found DJing when I was like 12 or 13, and got my first pair of turntables at like I think right after I turned 15.
Okay.
But I was already like looking for records. There was a few record stores in the neighborhood. My mom collects or used to collect a lot of old jazz records, and my dad's really into like a combination of like kind of folk rock but also psychedelic rock and classical music, specifically Baroque classical.
Oh, wow, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, he has a very specific type of musical palette.
So is that what you grew up listening to at your house? Like a mixture of your mom and dad? Or?
Yeah. I mean, my dad listened to like a lot of what was going on with like the modern rock stuff that was happening in the 90s. So we would listen to the radio stations, the rock radio stations in Philly were Y100 and WMMR, and I think WMMR is still around. But yeah, Y100 is now like 100.3 The Beat or something. Like it's like a hip hop station, hip hop and R&B station.
Okay.
But yeah, I was like, growing up, it was like a combination of listening to that stuff. So my dad liked Pearl Jam and like, things like that. And so I had, kind of that influence. I think the funkiest record I might have heard, which is still a pretty funky record, in the house is like Aretha Franklin, Respect.
Okay.
Right? But everything else was kind of like jazz. My mom's into a lot of show tunes. She has like a theater background. My parents had a theater company together up until I was 14. So that's kind of the, it's not super show tuney, but like that's definitely part of my upbringing with how my mother's musical palette.
Mm-hmm.
But also being curious about like what's being played out and what other people are experiencing, and hip hop, R&B, and I mean use the word loosely, but like neo soul during
Mm-hmm.
being in Philly and specifically West Philly. It was like a melting pot of all of that.
Right.
I could listen to Music Soul Child and State Property, and it all made sense because it was all coming out of Philly at the time.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, by my teen years, starting to work on a record collection, had my first pair of turntables and a mixer. It was like a Stanton DJ in a box or something.
Mm-hmm.
Some straight arm turntables and a 3-channel mixer. Learned how to. My mom to this day still gets really excited to remind me how happy she was to see like how I knew how to wire everything from the gate. I was just like, it's kind of straightforward. It's like it's color, red, white, But yeah, I think that's when she felt like she could, in some way, shape, or form, feel like she can encourage me in this space too. Because like my parents got divorced when I was 14, so like it was like a interesting time where she was like trying to figure out what.
Yeah, you stayed with your mom.
Yeah, I stayed with my mom and my dad, but it was an interesting time. And then my childhood best friend Moses, he rapped, he kind of DJ'd, he did, he wrote poetry, he played bass, did all these things, and he kind of was like, him and his mother were kind of like foundationally what brought me into hip hop in a way that was more, I don't know, like if foundational is the word, because like he wasn't complete. Like, I mean, his mom was at what's the famous battle? Was it at Lincoln Center or something? Not Lincoln Center. At what was the square? The one with it was like Dynamic Rockers versus.
Oh, the Roxy. The Roxy.
It wasn't I mean, she used to go to the Roxy, but she's from Brooklyn and used to like come around. So she would always tell me about like the history of hip hop from her perspective and stuff. I think she was like at the Rocksteady versus Dynamic Rockers or something. That might have been the Roxy, whatever. But like was in all that, and she kind of passed that down to her son, and her son kind of like, he was a couple years older than me, kind of brought me into it. So I got it kind of ran congruent with the way that I already like to dig for things, and like really like the idea of like amassing this like catalog of like information and in general, but definitely when it came to music, helped me kind of identify myself in a lot of ways, because coming up, predominantly black neighborhood, biracial family, like my mother being Jewish and older. Like my mom had me when she was 39, so like it wasn't even like a young hip mom or anything. Like it was like my mom was old, my father's older. Like it's
my mom was old.
Not old,
I
older.
know,
I
get
mean?
it. I get it.
So, I really found digging for music that was like past, present, and what I thought or felt like was going to be the future, at least for me, and what I was into, was a huge part of how I could ground myself.
Got it.
And yeah, Moses was a huge part of that. He brought me to The Gathering, which was like, still the longest running hip hop event in Philly, like as far as like the elements and like, that type of thing. So I used to break. I started the breaking with another friend of mine, Sama. We started the breaking club at my high school. I went to Central High School in Philly. Okay. So, and that's still running from what I hear. I don't really go back to my high school.
Oh, that's dope.
And yeah, I just kept on going, and I'm kind of coming back to it, specifically like a evolution of how I experience dance music. The foundation of what that experience is now really started within like spaces like The Gathering, DJing West Philly house parties, that was really like, that's like my core upbringing, you know, that kind of like, and you know, I started on vinyl, but there was like also that moment of like newer music and rap stuff coming out via like Dat Piff and like all of the like the blogs, the blog era. That was also like kind of graduated from that class of that and the electronic music that was coming out at the time, and the fact that like around 08, 09, all of that was kind of coming together because of like artists like Kid Cudi or like whoever. It all just kind of evolved. But yeah, like foundationally it starts for me at the point of me getting turntables, and everything is like The Gathering and West Philly house parties. Was that, depending on how old you were and what music was out at the time, did you start playing hip-hop first? Or because you, if I understand correctly, you started to get your record collection together, which based on your background is probably like very diverse. But you playing records, or like actually, because I know you technically also up there, was hip hop the first, like, I guess, genre I could say for you to play, or were you always playing everything, so to speak? It was the first genre that like kind of glued everything together, but I had a very loose understanding of, loose comparatively to what hip hop had become already at that time. So I really was like, when I was like 16, 17, I was still very much like, I'm going to keep on doing this in the breaking community. And the breaking community, when you think about what hip hop, especially then, before, like, we have a lot of like, you know, because of Red Bull, because of like all these battles that are like live streamed, you have like newer breaks that people are making so it can be cleared and you have to worry about. But like James Brown was hip hop to me, you know, like Willie Hutch, like you know, any of the, and also during that time there was like the dap tone. That was like almost like the dap tone era of this resurgence of like, you know, Budo's band and Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, and you get this kind of like, oh, I don't just have to play this old record, I can play a record that like is akin to what they were capturing in those studios back then. Right. So at that point it kind of was like, oh no, this makes sense. Like, this is, I can make this a thing. But, and that's still foundationally is like how I understand hip hop. It's not, and that's a very personal understanding. I understand like socially rap is rap, and like, you know, but like, not to be like, oh, you know, they don't, these kids don't know about the elements. Like, it's not, I don't really care about how other people process what hip hop like is. I mean, I do care, but like, I just know for myself, it's a little bit more expansive than just an MC and like, you know, some 808s or like whatever it is now. And that's just how I experience it. It's not, you know, to knock anybody. So you were also part, or are actually, sorry, are probably still part of the Illvibe Collective, which is also based, started in Philly. Some of the members are probably now, including you, not in Philly anymore. There's a few of us left. But, and I remember you from, I sound so old, back then, we were pretty young. So how did that come about? Or how did you meet all the members that are part or we're part of? I'm not sure if all of them are still around. I mean, everybody's still in the crew in whatever capacity. It's still, you know, it's myself, I was the last member added. Mr. Sonny James, DJ Lil Dave, Panic, Philly Blunt, Skip Mode. And it started, well, the first Illvibe member I met was Lil Dave. Okay. I was DJing in a spot called Medusa Lounge. I used to do I was probably like 18 or 19. I used to do Tuesday nights. It was like a battle cypher night for like a certain era of older, I don't want to say like disgruntled, but like kind of like older rappers that didn't like, they had their scene. You know what I mean? Okay. So it was an MC battle. It was an MC night. Like, it was like, I just played instrumentals. I was just playing like, you know, old DJ Premier instrumentals. And like, it's funny. There's a, what was his name? I can't remember his name. Transmute ANS. That's what he went by, Transmute ANS. This is very, very, very hip hop. I mean, like, people with their graph names being their rap names or their DJ names, like that type of era. And he hooked me up with a hard drive of all these, like, I think it was like nonfiction, like pretty much like anything.
The backpackers.
Very backpack rap instrumentals. So I still have that drive somewhere, but it's like stacks and stacks of folders of like just all these instrumentals. So I used to play that and just run through that for like 4 hours. It was just like 4 hours of just that. I think at a certain point at the beginning, they wanted me to like, all right, well, the rappers aren't here yet, so like let's wait like 45 minutes so you can play a set. And I was like, oh, cool, I get to actually play a real set. And even the way that I got that gig is very, very, very specific. I used to hang out at this comic book store. The people who run that comic book store, one of them, this guy Will Macy, still an amazing guy, went into teaching. He's still an amazing comic book artist as well. And he rapped. He was within that space of like, this particular collective of rappers. And he had to be in his mid-30s, early 30s at that time, and I was probably like 18, 19, but like I was just there, and they knew that I was hungry to like play some stuff, and I would pretty much do it for free. So they brought me in, and that's when I met Lil Dave, because Lil Dave was just hanging out that night. And actually the first photo, I can send it to you, it's on my Facebook. I think one of the first photos on my Facebook is like me DJing and Dave behind me. It's from the night we met.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So it started with him. He introduced me to Sonny, and the rest of the crew kind of followed. We had like it was like 08, 2008, 2000, maybe early 2009, maybe even 07, 08. They had a event at this spot called the Arts Garage, and I would just come and hang out. I remember the first time, and it's probably maybe like 20, 30 people in the room, and I remember Sonny shouted me out on the mic, and I had never gotten a mic shout out before, and I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool, everybody's so cool. It was like such a big deal. Also, one of the first times that I heard like a Waajeed remix.
Oh, wow.
It was a Marvin Gaye I Want You remix, and I remember he played it, and I got so hype about it. And now, like, 10, 15 years later, I got a track on one of Gito's compilations, and it's like the homies. So it's like a long kind of lineage that I was entering, and like a crew of people that I felt very at home with. And then I started my own parties. I started doing my own parties, and the one that kind of like blew up. This is like when I used to go by DJ Fish.
Yeah, that's how I met you as
the DJ Fish era up until RIP up until 2013.
How did that name? Did you name yourself, or did somebody else give you that?
My last name's Fishman Dickerson.
Oh, okay. Well,
so it's just, and my middle name's Lawrence. Like, not to reveal the sauce or anything.
And
like
my
that.
birthday is
right now, in a couple weeks actually. But no, it's definitely like I try not to. My girl kind of makes fun of me for it sometimes. Like, you can have a little mystery, or you can have like, you don't have to downplay everything. But I'm like, I'm pretty down to earth when it comes to, it's like, I just have a long ass name. So yeah, I can mix and match. But I used to play Little League. I was like pretty good at baseball when I was younger, and they used to call me Fishies. Then in the high school, some of those people that were on that team went to my high school, and they used to call me Fishy. And then when I started kind of writing graph, whatever, I was a toy. But I went by Fish. And
okay, that makes perfect sense.
Started in the 10th grade. Yeah. So Arts Garage. Oh, the party was called the Duplex. I was trying to remember the name of the party.
Your party, or the party of the Illvibe?
The Illvibe. So so that was the party at the Arts Garage. Then I started doing my own parties, and the party was the one that kind of blew up in 2009 was Super Dope. It was a Wednesday night, and it was the first time. I think it was like my 21st. I started doing it when I was 20, And then on the week of my 21st birthday, there was like 300 people in there.
Oh, wow.
And it was a big deal. It was a thunderstorm that night too. It was just like people were just, they wanted to come out.
Seeking shelter.
Seeking shelter and good music. So,
oh, that's dope.
and to an extent, all the parties that I've done since then are derivative of that one. I would say Super Dope was like the moment where it's like, okay, this is how I'm forming my DJ sensibilities to the outside world. It's like, this is what it looks like. It's a little bit of hip hop at the time, a little bit of electronic. Even when like, this is pre-Skrillex, but like UK dubstep, when that was like kind of becoming a thing. That was like, because you know, it's around the same tempo as any like Southern rap or like anything like that. So it was like, '09 was a really good time for mixing sounds, and especially in Philly, Mad Decent as a record label was still there. Santa Gold's first album came out. There was like this kind of convergence of like, you can do anything, but also like it all sounds good, like for the most part. At least still to my ears, but yeah, that was
at
it.
At that time when you said that your party's super dope, then it popped off, right? And you just turning 21. What was your I guess goal or vision at that point? Because you've been DJing for a few years already at that time, right? You're part of the Illvibe Collective.
Well, not yet.
Not yet. Oh, I'm sorry, that came later.
So this is the thing. This is the interesting thing. So around that time in 2009, Sonny and Dave, I think specifically, asked me if I wanted to join the crew. And, you know, I will pat myself on the back for this. It's like I had a little bit of, you know, foresight where I was just like, man, I don't want to just be the Illvibe youngin'. Like, I'm already younger than, you know, Sonny's 8 years older than me, and he's the youngest in the crew. And I was like, I don't want to just be the youngin' and I'm not contributing yet. Like, I'm really not properly contributing. Like, there's something to be said about like building yourself up so you can like kind of support the people around you. And I had just started this one party. My name wasn't really where it needed to be, in my opinion, yet. So I joined the crew in 2011, a couple years later, right before I did my first solo tour in Germany.
Oh, okay.
And it was like a build up where it was like, okay, I'm doing this. And then I'm going to be like, all right, at this point, now my name is big enough that like me joining the crew means something.
I get what you're saying.
You know, it was going to mean something regardless, but like I wanted to make sure that like younger people knew that, oh, you're following me, well, and I amassed a certain following that like, okay, now come over here, you know, come over here and rock with like my crew, you know.
Back to my question is like, what was your like vision or your goal at that time? Like, when you was like, I want to be, you know, the working, quote unquote, famous or well respected. These are two different things. They can go hand in hand, but they're still, you know, two different pair of shoes. As in, like, you know, Philly has a very long list of very great DJs. So I'm interested in what was your, like, you already are a DJ, but what did you want to become at that point? Like, what were your how do you say, put your sights on? I don't know what the saying is. You know what I mean?
I think I've always struggled with the kind of like, what is this supposed to be? I mean, there's something very blue collar about the way that I came into DJing, where it's like, not only like during all this time of like creating and inventing parties or, you know, whatever, it's also DJing for artists. And I was lucky enough to like DJ for relatively, well, not even relatively, but like established artists as well. Like I happened to grow up around the corner from this shop called, this store called the Culture Shop. It was owned by Kindred the Family Soul. Kindred lived 5-6 blocks away from me. At a certain point, I started DJing for them for local shows. There was another rapper at the time named Two-Face. He later started using his real name, Mike Taylor. ended up having some songs with like Afrojack, like in like the house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like scene. But another person I came up around, and I was DJing for him, for certain stuff, and even one of the house parties we threw was where he got signed. It was like in West Philly, and he got signed to Epic Records because of that house party that we threw.
Oh, sweet.
So there was that, but then also he started bringing me around the Roots studio, so Larry Gold's studio, in like I guess what is now like Northern Liberties, Philly or whatever. And then I started DJing for Dice Raw, and then Dice, because I was around Dice, he started kind of like bringing me around Black Thought, and then that meant that when they were doing the Money Making Jam Boys, which was like the Roots, that era of Roots albums, like their super group, it was like Black Thought, STS, Greg Porn, Truck North, Dice. I'm trying to remember if there was anybody else. I think that's it. So I was DJing for them.
I see. Okay.
We did the Roots picnic. Like Dice used to, even before I was DJing for them, Dice was like, yo, just bring your backpack just in case if we need you to DJ for an artist. So it was very like blue collar in the way that almost like I'm outside the assembly line, like waiting for work or something like that. It just like I had no context. Like Philly is very much I was lucky enough to be close enough to the industry that exists, but it's not New York. New York is like very much like, you know, all the offices are downtown. If you really want to like, you're close enough to it even subconsciously that you know that there's like, and you know, the glass ceiling might be a little bit higher if there's a glass ceiling at all, but there is definitely a glass ceiling in Philly. And I've probably done a little bit of everything in Philly because of that, like trying to figure out what that looks like. So even to this day, like I really do still struggle with like, what, you know, my goals, or like, you know, what the thing is. Like we can talk a little bit about like what it's become, but back then, man, I just wanted to have a successful party, build, extend the community of my already at the time very tight friend group.
Did you go? I guess it's kind of also the question of like, did you, after you graduated high school, did you go to school, or was there ever another option of you know how, or a pressure from your family, hey, we want you to do this. So it's like, hey, I'm gonna study this, or I get a job just in case, you know, this doesn't work out.
It was tough, man. I mean, at the time, me and my mom were arguing about so many different things that I went to community for a little while, I went to community college for a little while. I was trying to, and what's funny is like, even when I went to community, I went for visual arts. So it's like, I don't think I ever.
That was that plain B.
Yeah, like I don't know what I was thinking as far as like making money. I don't come from a rich family. I don't have a concept of like what it means to make a lot of money. I've been able to be relatively successful, been able to move out of Philly, but like foundationally, I have absolutely no idea like what I was thinking at that time. I was just like, you know, like I am grateful that my parents were very much encouraging in some capacity of me doing what I love, and whatever that looks like. My parents are both, you know, very proud of what's become. Trying to explain to them the hardships of what that looks like is sometimes hard, because they just don't like really get how fickle and like any industry, but definitely like the music industry can be. But yeah, I mean, goals are tough. Like it's like kind of, and then, you know, you get into relationships, you get into your friend groups change and all those things, and those end up shifting your goals too. So true. I think I always wanted to be able to continue DJing no matter what. That grew into wanting to be able to continue making music. That grew into being, having some sort of consistent place in this extended music community, whether that's teaching, whether that's what I do now, separate from DJing and production, which is working as an A&R at Fool's Gold, I just want to be able to contribute in some way, shape, or form to the greater music community.
Okay.
You know.
Before I'm gonna ask you about the A&R thing, what at what point did you decide or wanting to move? I was like, move to New York, move to Brooklyn. When was that?
Yeah.
Or like, what made you leave Philly? Let's put it that way. Maybe there
Right.
was another city that was on the horizon. I don't know, but
I mean, it was always kind of New York.
it was always,
Yeah.
you know, it's a choice for many. But I'm just asking, like, what made you leave Philly? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an East Coast person, true and true. So like, it wasn't really going to be much besides New York, unless it was another country. But I'd done everything under 2 different names. Like I did everything that could kind of be done for what I do in Philly. I toyed around with moving earlier, like, you know, back and forth over like the last decade or so. Had close friends that like I kind of have like this friend group that we were all at one point going to move to New York together, and then I'm the last that actually like, well, kind of. There's still one other person that didn't move, but there was not much else I could do in Philly. I mean, the big push to come up here was my relationship with my partner Simone. She works in film, so it made sense for that. Also, me getting the job at Fool's Gold happened right before I moved.
I see. Okay.
Which didn't necessarily at the time require me to move, but it just made more sense. You know, it's a Brooklyn label. Come to Brooklyn, you know? And, you know, it works out to be, like, closer to the team. A-Trak, like, the whole, you know, Nick, like, everybody's, you know, a train ride away or walking distance. You know, it's, like, kind of cool. So, it was kind of bound to happen for me. You know, a lot of people, I had people in Philly who were just like, why are you still here? Why are you still here?
Yeah.
And it's like, once you get to that point, when people are like,
you shouldn't be here.
You just shouldn't be there. And it's like, there also needs to be, like, my presence is felt at home. Like, I will speak on that. Like, people know. People, there are plenty of people who know what I've done, you know? And what I created and what I built there.
How is that? So sorry to interrupt you, but so now you live in Brooklyn, right? You obviously you grew up in Philly, but you still throughout the years have your main party that you've done in Philly. Is it Friends and Fam?
Yeah,
right?
Friends and Fam.
You
which
did
is
it
over
here.
now.
Yes, I'm gonna get to that. So you did that throughout the years in Philly, but also you did parties here. So what my question, I guess, is how did, for you to live in New York, but you bring in your Philly sensibilities with you, how did you navigate being between cities, even though you lived then in New York, right? But you still worked in both cities in that.
You're talking about, like, since I've moved to New York?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's like...
Those 2 cities are not far apart, right? But they are different in a way. So I'm just wondering how you have to, how that felt for you.
I mean, it just felt like there was more room. And, you know, like, that's relative as well, because, like, New York is, when it comes to DJing and when it comes to it being in a music industry city in that regard, it's definitely, like, oversaturated. And anybody can tell you that. But I think, not to be like, it's gonna sound negative, but it's not. I'm only speaking from, like, my own experience, and it's not a negative statement. Like, and people tell me this all the time, without me even having to say this. Like, Philly's not going anywhere, and it's not that Philly isn't growing and expanding, but, like, for me, I don't have to you always have to maintain, like you always need to maintain like something where you can go back to your block, right? I didn't leave on bad terms. I still come back and still contribute.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not really like hard to do both. Like promoting at home isn't as hard as promoting here in New York for the most part, because people know who I am at home. Okay. So like up here, it's a little bit more difficult because it's like, oh, I think I know what he does. Like, oh, he's played soul on the horn, right? Oh, but like, does he like? I've struggled with just even telling people that I meet that like I'm a DJ and producer first, because the first thing that really just ends up popping in my head is like, oh, I'm at Fool's Gold. Like I work at Fool's Gold. Yeah, it's just such a New York industry thing. Like, what do you do? What can you do for me? Yeah. So it's like if I say Fool's Gold, it's like, oh, okay, cool. It's like, oh, I have context for like, but like if I say I'm a DJ and producer, it's like, oh, like, you know, you get the usual questions like, oh, what type of music do you play? What type of this? What type of that? What do you do? And it's like, it's really difficult to like have to lay out your resume all the time, especially where contextually people look at it the same as anybody else. Yeah. If they've never experienced what you do. And then a lot of times that's kind of the case. It's like people are finding out now. Because there was a time that I had a pretty consistent presence in New York. Pandemic happened. After the pandemic, so many more DJs came out of the pandemic. So it's like now it's, and even my music sensibilities have evolved in a certain way where I didn't move up here to do exactly what I was and play exactly what I was playing in Philly. So it's kind of Philly is Philly. I can make those changes in my music sensibilities there and still feel like there's foundationally some people that would be into it and understand what that progressions look like because they followed me for X amount of years. Here, it's like almost like a restart that takes a certain amount of time. Got it. That makes me ask the question, you talked a lot about hip hop, right? And how that's also how you started DJing. You were breaking. And when at least the productions that I could find, right, are dance music, right, in broad genre, whatever, however you define that. What made you, I can't even say transition, but I guess the plain question is like, what made you make house music or dance music? Excuse me. However you define that, I leave that up to you. I don't want to put the words in your mouth. And that started way before you moved to New York. That started definitely before I moved to New York. I feel like genre is very it's necessary to some extent, but it's kind of there so people can kind of categorize you, and so an industry can categorize you. Exactly, that's how I see it too. And it sounds like it sounds pretentious to be like, oh, I'm free of genre, because I'm not. I just know that my influences are more expansive than just one genre, and it's indicative of the time I spent dancing, this time I spent in, also, like I said, the breaking community in Philly. Another very, very pivotal moment in my music sensibility, DJ career, whatever, is the Sunday party in Philly. At Silk City? Is that? No. Well, they do Second Sundays is Second their Sundays. Dance music different. Battle thing. But the thing that's like at the I guess the father of that is the Sunday party, started by Lee Jones, Francisco Collazo, and So that party, which I've played a number of times now, when I was younger, it existed before this time in a different spot, but the place that it existed in when I started coming around was there was a place called the Bubble House on UPenn Drexel's campus, and they had like an alleyway that was like a really nice, like kind of like nicely paved and like something. It looked like it was on a college campus. Like it was very nice. And they would set up the turntables in the second floor of the Bubble House with the windows open facing out to the street. So they pretty much turned the whole space into like an outdoor venue.
Oh, nice. And
I mean, foundationally, like my house music sensibilities from a very like my understanding of the community kind of starts there, and what that looks like starts there. And a lot of the breakers that I knew went there. It's like the breakers would go to like breaking events to battle, and if they just wanted to dance, they would go to the Sunday party, you know, and just so as far as my production is concerned, that ran congruent with when I was learning about, because I didn't like 4 on the floor house music coming up. Like it was the complete opposite of what I understood enjoyable dance music for me to be, because I come from a breaking community. But broken beat is now kind of evolved into like what's called bruck. A lot of the dance floor jazz stuff at the time. I guess like the principal artists during that era for me were like kind of Bugs in the Attic, trying to think, Jazzanova, Kyoto Jazz Massive, with a lot of the, you know, a lot of the dance floor jazz.
A lot of classics.
Yeah, it was like classics now, but like I was 18. This was all going on at the same time as me like doing these rap events, doing all this stuff. I'm just a sponge, man. Like all this stuff made sense to me, and there was a place in my mind for it where it all made sense. That might be why it's been difficult for me to figure out my goals, because if I'm doing all these things at once, whatever pops, I have to like navigate that for a period of time to kind of exist. But then I'm like, oh, this is over here. So it's like figuring all that stuff out. So yeah, I mean, musically, and like the thing that I enjoyed the most about DJing at the beginning is the same thing that I enjoy about production, is like finding interesting rhythms that are danceable but not necessarily completely coined as dance music. Because I feel like dance music has a certain stigma to it where it's almost like a tool. Like it's like, this is the tool, that this is what you do today. Like that's what happened in EDM, like all that stuff. Like it's a very, very loose term. Same with jazz, same to an extent with hip hop. I think that like the genre stuff is really, really difficult to rock with, because like.
How would you describe the music that you're making? And when I say describe, you don't have to describe it. I guess categorize would be the right. Even though you just said you know it's necessary, but you don't necessarily subscribe to the genres. But if you would have to, and if you send music to, whether they categorize it correctly or not, if you send it to Traxsource, for example, right?
Yeah.
They have to, or like they put it into a category. So what would you, and I'm sure you do many different things, but like if somebody asks you, like, what would be the one thing that you could use?
Yeah,
stomach to use.
Yeah, I know. I asked it's funny you asked that, because like I asked A-Trak to kind of help me define. He was like, yo, because he's heard me play for a while, and he's always one that's like champions. He's like, you used to break, right? Like he's like like all the breaking side, the Philly side, like he kind of enjoys that. Like that's a part of my my existence in the DJ community and where I stand in the DJ community. But he kind of was like, I guess like your production is like soulful club music. So it's like, I'll say the there's 4 direct influences as far as if we are going to speak on genre. It's definitely club, and I grew up listening to Baltimore club, Philly club, and Jersey club. We don't have to get into the history of like what the difference is, because a lot of people don't even
I would have not known that there's a Philly club, quite honestly.
Yeah, Philly club, DJ Sega,
Showing
like there's
my ass,
like there's a Philly club history as well. And so there's that. There's house music, but more defined in like what would be like a soulful house type of space, like a Osunlade or like
a Lady Alma.
Lady Alma, definitely a Philly hero. Broken Beat, once again, Lady Alma, buzzing that, and to an extent, like breakbeats. So it's like if you kind of put those four things together, those are like the four musical pillars. And I say breakbeats because that's what I think when it comes to me leaning back into what is quote unquote dance music. Foundationally, that's I've been saying foundationally a lot.
No, but I get what you mean. But also my question, my follow-up question, based on that will be, obviously these are all the musical influences, but furthermore, I'm wondering, or I would like to ask your opinion on how much do you think that you having a dance background, right, or you having a breaking background has helped you, what's the word I want to use, in your journey as a DJ, but more so as a producer, to see, number one, the other side of the dance floor, but also like to maybe have seen what people like, or be part of a dance community at the same time that you're actually part of the DJ community. Yeah, because there's a lot of Sonny James who also had a different name back then. I know he can dance too. A lot of people can dance. So a lot of DJs used to dance or whatever, so that's, I just wanted to know if that, or if it doesn't, it also can be that it doesn't have an didn't have an influence.
Definitely. I think it does. It just took me a second to think about it, but I think there's certain intricacies in breaks, because a lot of the older breaks, you have live session drummers, live horn players, guitar players, all that stuff. And I grew up, and I don't even know if this was always the case in breaking as a whole, but definitely in certain Philly styles where, like, I think of like Why Not, right? As a breaker, someone who steps and moves not just to like the drum of what's going on. There's certain hits that go, certain horn stabs or something like that, and it might make them do a different move. I think those beats sometimes can be really complicated, and breaking kind of almost is like body braille. It's like almost like you're reading it without saying anything, or really like you're not necessarily seeing the musicians play, right? But you're hearing it and you're feeling it in a certain way. And I think that definitely is like, maybe it's ADHD, but I get bored with like kind of like certain loops. There are sonic things that can make loops interesting, but I like when things kind of like move a little bit out of sync, shift a certain way, and I think that's why I enjoy like Bruck and Broken Beat so much, because and even I don't know. I don't necessarily know how to quote unquote make it quote unquote cool. I don't know if it's a situation. I had a conversation with a UK homie of mine where it's like, like it's not like people remember it from a certain era, but they don't think about it in current terms. But I know there's plenty of producers, like everything is coming out of Co-op Presents or Dance Regular and like those type of labels. Like there's a community that really rocks with that stuff. Yeah. Man. A young community that really rocks with it. But I feel like it runs adjacent to all the hype around Afro beats and like, a lot of like the Brazilian funk, like the baile funk stuff and all that. It runs congruent with all that. And I think that with that aspect of like it being in some sort of I guess like musical lineage of, you know, that can play right next to anything that's happening right now. I kind of want to be production wise in the forefront of that in my own way. I don't know what that's gonna look like. I'm also like unfortunately wildly unfocused sometimes. So like I can put stuff out that sounds like it. Like I would say there's elements of that in I did this remix for this artist Suzanne Shear out of Philly. That definitely broken elements to it, but like a little bit more up tempo, not something that's like, a lot of broken beat stuff was house adjacent, so it would be like maybe like 126, 127 BPM. That one is like 133, 134. Yeah. And I say all that to say I'm still figuring it out. But
yeah, it would be boring
hard,
if you would know everything.
It's hard. I mean, I've tried to create so many templates in Ableton where I can just be like, I'm gonna start here, and that's kind of helped me out, is like starting with that. I also use like not a lot, but like a few pieces of outboard gear, like SB404 MK2 sampler, TR8S drum machine. Like these are like also kind of parts of how I want to perform in the future. But yeah, it's kind of difficult. I wish my brain could make it easier for me, man. Like, oh, I just play house music. Oh, I just play hip hop, and it's just like no one has a question of what you do, and you don't have a question. You don't have one either, and you can expand from that. But it's just not how my brain works.
How does I was debating the whole time which question I should ask you first, but since you mentioned Fool's Gold a couple of times already, you are the A&R or part of the A&R team at Fool's Gold. Is that correct? If not, correct me, please. But you use the term yourself, so that's why I'm using it. And I'm wondering, number one, obviously, what does that job entail? But also, what do you think, from your perspective, does the role of an A&R mean in 2024?
Right. On paper, the A&R team is me and A-Trak, but we're a small team, and we all end up helping each other out.
Yeah.
And, like, if we find something cool, we don't like not share it or something, or like someone else on the team won't like like that's his job or
it's
something.
Not the 90s with 5 A&Rs fighting, right?
Yeah. I'm no Dante Ross. Don't it's people who lay the groundwork. Even me coming into this job is like something that I didn't know how to enter, but A-Trak reached out to me. So he saw, him and Nick Catchdub saw like, oh yeah, like I feel like his music sensibilities kind of make sense for it. So there's two things. So yeah, I like to say A&R and stuff, because like I've done graphic work for, we put out a Byron the Aquarius EP, and I did the cover art for that.
Okay.
So like, like I said, that little bit of community college art background. No, I've always kind of had some sort of connection to visual art and making flyers or something. But my role is combination of a lot of like internet digging and just being out and about. And that's another reason why I wanted to move to New York, because if you're looking for new artists, this is a place that new artists stop at if they're from out of town. If, even going to a concert with like a major artist, you might, meet a newer artist backstage and find out like, and I think in 2024, and I'm only going to use Fool's Gold as an example, like there's been an influx of mainstream world music in a way, if you think about like what's come out of the quote unquote global South, and like things that just aren't American, or whether it's a Burna Boy or a Bad Bunny or any like it's not quote unquote like American in the, you know, speaking whatever. But like my thought process coming into working at the label was like Brooklyn label, worldwide sensibilities. So like the first artist that I signed was a guy named Muzi out of Durban, South Africa.
And how did you find him on the internet, or did you meet him in person?
A friend of mine put me onto his music a long time ago. And we were talking about trying to look into markets that we haven't at the label necessarily delved into, but we didn't want to be like, I'm a Piano is all the rage right now. So now Fool's Gold is going to put out I'm a Piano. Like, it wouldn't make sense. And what was great about Muzi and kind of how it came together is like Fool's Gold has been around for 15 plus years. That means that there's an influence that has, you know, come full circle. So he was really excited because a lot of the music that he came up on between, like, you know, like anything from Ed Banger or like, you know, any of the stuff, like combination of like French touch type house stuff, and that, you know, A-Trak's definitely a part of what that community entails. Those were all big influences for him. But then also like South African Kwaito music, other like electronic stuff out of the UK. They're all parts of where Muzi's sensibilities come from. So it was like kind of a no-brainer. It was just like, oh no, this is the guy. And he put out his album on Fool's Gold last fall. And we put out some remixes for it. One kind of trickled it out over the winter. One from Dan Kai, that is my favorite remix from the project. You know, selfishly pointing that out, but Dan Kai, Immaculate, and another guy named Ed, EDD. I think he has another name, goes by another name as well, but I can't remember. I don't know, I'm just listing it, but if anybody wants to, like, you know, do their Googles. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of like my first major, like, let me bring this artist to the label. Since then, I brought Byron, but Byron's interesting because, like, me and Byron were talking, and then Byron just works so consistently and so prolific. He just, like, reached out to A-Trak direct. He was just like, and then it just worked out. It's perfect, man. Byron's great. Yeah. And then there's a few other artists, whether artists that I brought to the label or people that I'm working with that have, you know, reached out or whatever.
And I sorry to interrupt you right here, but I just remember asking Pete from BBE the same question.
Yeah,
it's two different.
He would know better than me.
It's totally, in my opinion, right? Fool's Gold and BBE are two different, completely different labels. But my question would be the same as far as, like, what are the advantages of being with a label these days, or reaching out as someone, for example, right, who has been doing has been doing music for a long time, who has released music on Bandcamp the whole time, or like, you know, you can put all your stuff on streaming platforms on your own. You have a good amount of followers, however you define that number. What is the pros and maybe even the cons of, like, being with a label? And it does not, obviously, I'm assuming you would speak from a Fool's Gold perspective, but, I mean, like, in general.
Well, the general thing is more like something that I can't necessarily speak on because it's the first label I've ever worked at. So it's like, it's not like I have. But
you're an artist.
I am an artist. Yeah. I do have understandings to an extent of like, and from other artists that I've worked with and are friends with, like, what they deal with on a major, like if you're on a major label. I think just from a Fool's Gold perspective, one of the great things that we bring to the table is context. People who are looking out for Fool's Gold stuff, or if like people are kind of checking for an artist and they're like following their journey, and then they find out they get signed to Fool's Gold, they automatically think A-Trak, they think these like, you know, Danny Brown, Run the Jewels, and then all like Duck Sauce, any of this stuff. The context really allows for people's guards to kind of come down a little bit and be like, I know this, now I don't have to think about where to place this person in my mind. I think, you know, it comes from the lineage of, you know, what a Def Jam artist might have sounded like, or like South Soul versus West End, or something like that. Like labels Motown, the Motown sound, you know, versus, you know, Stax Records. Like our sound is very sprawling and wide to an extent, but like because we're such a small team and we're kind of like, we kind of trust each other to know what's cool for what we're trying to do. It allows for there to be like a bit of a concentration of energy, and that can provide a little bit more support for artists that sign to our label. Yeah. That's not to say that, you know, like with anything, I think if you're working at a certain level, it might not be necessary for you to outsource. When you think about it, as far as where we're at and how people can democratically, you know, release stuff on Bandcamp, people putting up, like, you know, you sign up for someone's Patreon and they're putting up remixes every month. There's so many different ways that people can get it now, you know? But one thing that I, you know, and once again speaking from a Fool's Gold perspective, is context and maybe a little bit more support groundwork-wise. You know, we have connects to, you know, music distributors in the sense of like, you know, if you're a DJ and you don't know how to get on a promo list, like we have that structure set up. We have work with other PR companies, and yeah, I mean, it's context and a little bit more support. Got you know? Okay. And sometimes for certain artists who have like a definitive sound, that's all they need, you know? Yeah. It can make the difference, but like being it's like being involved in any other, like, to an extent, like a movement. Like people, and you know, not to be like Fool's Gold is a movement, but like, it was and is. Like there's those day off parties and the way that people talk about the label, it's very much like how people have defined how they interact in the music community and the community at large. And I would hope that if you're an artist looking to expand your, like, the people, your listeners and people who want to get involved, that you would want to be part of a community that has like a diehard fan base.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. No, and while you say that, I just remember the conversation I had yesterday with an artist who also has their own label, and he's like, oh yeah, I just signed an EP with an English label. I'm like, oh yeah, but you have, you know, my naive, I was like, yeah, but you have your own. It's like, yeah, but I want to break into that market and want to, you know, be. And I'm like, oh, it makes perfect sense, you know. Yeah. So yeah, I guess it's just like everybody or every label has their own community or has done the groundwork to establish their own community for them to bring other people on and to expand.
Definitely the independence. I feel like the independence, like, you know, whatever level you're at in that, like, you know what a bring up co-op and dance regular, you know, like broken beat labels but like, you know, even if they might not necessarily foundationally broken beat and Bruck, they can expand the house, they can do all that stuff, but like that sound and that community, people were paying attention to it. Right. That's what's coming out of there for us. And even I know I can tell by what I get sent And like, but it's like a lot of people think of us as like, oh, you know, like this French house sample based disco type of thing, and a certain kind of like rap stuff is what I get sent consistently. But we're a lot more than that. I also do some A&R work for Juliet Records, which is kind of like a Fool's Gold sister label started by Chromeo.
I see.
So that's like, you know, and their label, because of Chromeo, is associated with more funk, house, like, you know, a certain kind of like modern funk sensibility. So yeah, I that's one thing that I do love about labels. Like, it doesn't you don't have to be like, you know, Defected can feel very genre specific. That's why they have so many subsidiary labels, is because like this genre goes over here, this goes over, like classic music goes over here, and this like I'd rather have like the label like that. I feel like is a little bit more concentrated than, and this is why like when people even send me stuff, they're like, I released on this label, this label, this label, this label. Sometimes that can provide more context than you telling me what genre you make.
Makes sense.
You know?
For sure. Thank you. That makes perfect sense. One of the questions I have, I don't have many questions left, and also I feel like if you listen and you heard any noise, it's because we're on top of or next door of a auto shop, and apparently they're jamming downstairs, even though I asked them to turn it down. Never mind. I hope you guys can hear everything clearly. But I remember, I think one of the last few times that I ran into you was we were both attending an event about zoning, and we talked about it was right before you, as you previously mentioned, retiring your party, which has a very sad connotation to it, right? Because it was not like, we can't do this party anymore. It was more like, no, I'm going to do the last one. It's just kind of like, not the funeral. What's the before? Like, this is going to be the last one. So my bigger question for you is first of all, explain what the party was, right? A little bit, how it came about and how it ran for 10 years, I believe. And what made you come to a point to decide this is going to be the end of it? I'm, so to speak, retiring the party.
So the party's called Friends and Fam. It ran from December 2013 to December 2023. Weird. And like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of extension of some of the other parties that I was already doing. I had a party called Super Dope from 2009 to 2011. Then I had a party called Fish Tank when I was still doing the DJ Fish thing. That was the simultaneous art show and dance party. So we used to like project artwork over like rotating artwork in the club. And then eventually became like a separate art show that was like a one night only art show and a dance party afterwards. And then when I, got rid of the DJ Fish name, started focusing on Matthew Law, I went and started this party, Friends and Fam. At the time, it was kind of an answer to two things. At the time, I was doing a bunch of gigs with Questlove, and for people who have gone to a Questlove set, he famously likes to play longer than most quote-unquote headliners tend to play. Like, you get a headliner, they might play for an hour, hour and a half or something like that. He'll 3 hours is like usually his minimum. So I would open, friends would be like, oh, did I miss your set? And I'm like, yeah, like I played for an hour. I played like 45 minutes or something like that. I remember we did like the Heidi Klum Halloween party one year, and like I almost got booted off but before I even played, because, his set is fixed. I'm just supposed to be opening, and I think one of the Jonas Brothers wanted to DJ, so they like almost had to like cut my set. It's very like, like I said, blue collar stuff, like I'm adjacent to all this stuff, but I'm not the celebrity, I also at that time, when I was still going by DJ Fish, I was like the East Coast champion for Red Bull 3 style. So
I didn't do my research enough. I didn't even talk about this.
Yeah, no, I did like the Red Bull 3 style battle stuff. I ended up placing 3rd nationally. And that meant that I had like a little bit of buzz back home and, you know, things were popping. But that was also like 2013. We're talking about like kind of a height of bottle service era type stuff. And a lot of us in that DJ community were like taking those type of gigs to get by, or, you know, just playing a lot of that type of stuff. And I knew there was a cluster of DJs, Sonny James, like, you know, like a bunch of us that were playing some of those kind of gigs and wanted a party where we could stretch out a little bit. So Friends and Fam started out as something that like there's no opener ever. It's always me and the guest DJ going back to back the entire time.
Oh, wow, dope.
And Philly's like a 4-hour city, so it's like 10 to 2. So it was really easy to break it up. So I would play the first hour, guest would play the second hour, then we do half hour, 15 minutes, and then 3 for 3 to close it out. So that was the whole process. So that the no headliner thing was a response to like doing those gigs with Quest. So like I was like, if I'm throwing my own party, this is how I want to set it up.
For sure.
And the other side of it was like trying to give some of like people that I like, local champions, you know, a place to play where they could like stretch out a little bit. And it just, you know, kept on expanding. We were at a spot called KFN and then expanded in 2018 to Warehouse on Watts, where, you know, I'm still throwing events there. I have a party there on May 18th. For the new stuff that I'm working on, which is Law's Lair. But the reason that I decided to end the party, and just like, you know, explain a little bit more like how it expanded. Started doing it in New York, partially at one point with OK Player at Baby's All Right, and then just kind of solo at, as far as like the party and the team, without sponsors. Besides Red Bull, Red Bull's kind of always been a consistent sponsor for me in like most of the events that I do. And then we were at Come On Everybody for a little while. And then also in Miami at Koyo and Wood Tavern, the OG Wood Tavern, not the new one. So it was moving a little bit. We were doing some cool stuff. Started expanding, getting like, you know, some bigger name DJs. We got the only time BenjiB's ever played in Philly was Friends and Fam. He also played the party in Miami. There, you know, people that I've always championed, like Cosmo Baker, had JazzyJeff. A-Trak came to not the last party, but the anniversary before. Miles Medina. It's like a bunch of names, right? The long and the short of it is that after 10 years, my friend group kind of changed. There was a shift in everybody getting a little bit older, the scene changing, and I would say the pandemic hit. So it just like completely shifted a lot of how people were going out.
Yeah, that's very true.
But it also jump-started me leaning more into like my electronic music sensibilities, which didn't necessarily completely run congruent with what Friends and Fam was.
I see. People
still considered Friends and Fam, at least at the base, like a hip-hop party.
Okay.
And it was never just that for me, but I understood where people were coming from. And to be able to grow past that, I had to dead it, you know? That's
it's the reason. I think the reason I ask is because usually people's parties end because the venue shuts down.
Oh yeah.
Or a pandemic, of course.
Yeah,
or it's just people can't find the venue, or management changes, or like whatever other out of your own hands reasons there are. But for you to say like, especially when you have it for 10 years, that's not a given. That's a long run for a party.
Mm-hmm.
For you to really make the conscious decision of like, no, it's time for something else, or it's time for something new, or this time has ended. You know, that's why I asked that question. So I think that's really cool, even though it might be sad for other people to not.
I mean, if the whole point for me throwing my own parties is to like present my own sensibilities to the community and build a community with and around it. If those sensibilities change, I'm not doing a service to myself or the community that I'm trying to help grow by doubling down on something that I don't really believe in the same way anymore. You know, there's there needed to be a shift.
Yeah,
you know?
Of course.
So there's other ways to go about it. You know.
Yeah. One of the questions I ask everybody is, I asked you. I'm just gonna ask you if you can name me 3 of your favorite dance tracks. I'm not even gonna ask you like, how do you connect it to, or like what it means to you. It's just like on the top of your head, you know like, oh, this has to be a crazy track. I'm just curious, you know.
I mean, my dance music North Star is Hot Music by Soho.
Like, this got mentioned already by No, I'm not saying this. It's just the example of what the song is.
It's great. Like Pal Joey, a whole like music guy when it comes to just that song alone. Like Earth People stuff aside, but like if you think about everything that I mentioned as far as my influences, like club, broken beat, house, like it's all that. And then it's like the jazz sensibilities with the Marsalis sample. Like it kind of sums it up. Also, that song was put on a CD by my cousin when I was like 11 or 12 for me.
Oh, wow.
So like I have a personal relationship with that record because of that. There was even thinking about like what else was on that CD. I think Elements of Life was on there. These are
really?
Elements of Life. Like it was just like, you know, and I didn't know what these songs were, but I knew they were on
Who's
there.
your cousin?
I know, right? Marlena Kane.
Asking for a friend. No.
Yeah. No, she lives in Atlanta. She's a surgeon, or like she works in medical, but she used to dance a lot. So like that was her thing.
That's so.
She's great. But yeah, definitely Hot Music. Man, I mean, because I'm thinking more about like what kind of influences my production. Well, okay, this is something that the Detroit Experiment version of Think Twice is like a permanent staple. I already have a thing that I do with when the horn stabs come in on the second. Like there's
a routine.
There's a routine that I kind of have with that record.
Okay.
I actually consistently tell myself like, you gotta stop playing that record, but I can't stop playing it. It's a great one. Man. And then, I mean, for me, as far as coming up in Philly and listening to club music, like DJ Sega's entire catalog, and he's a friend. Like that's like also like I always try to champion him as far as being like at least a conduit in what has been the club music. I don't want to say.
Can you say the name again? I don't.
DJ Sega.
Sega. Okay.
Like Sega
like
Genesis.
The game. Okay.
Yep. I mean he has a track. It's a flip of Busta Rhymes. Woo-ha, Got You All in Check. And that club record kind of was what at the time in like 08, 09 kind of crossed certain club music sensibilities into like what would be like the mainstream underground, like pre-DJ Class, I'm the Shit, and like records like that. This was kind of like a thing. I mean, I can list like a bunch of club music stuff.
Yeah. No, I have to do the Googles for
Yeah,
this
there's
one.
that. I mean, and then there's honorable mentions like, Be Sincere. Who's that?
MG Cole?
Yeah, MJ
Oh,
Cole.
yeah.
And then like, what's the Roy Davis Jr. Is that
With Kevin Everett?
Gabriel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Kevin Everett singing
Yeah,
it,
it's
but
Pevin
it's
on it.
Roy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Gabriel.
You gave me 5 already, but you can keep
I
going
mean, I
as
can
long
just
as
keep
you
going.
want.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's a
it's
bunch
just
of
something that I like to ask.
Yeah. Nah, I mean, there's a bunch. There's a whole lot of stuff.
Okay.
But yeah.
Would you what do you have anything? Not you just mentioned earlier you have a show on the 28th. On the 28th.
18th.
On the 18th.
And yeah.
Wow, the
Well,
numbers.
there's a few things. So all right. So
yeah,
so
tell us where we can find you and
Yeah.
where your parties are at.
The next couple events that I'm doing.
I'm not quite sure when this interview is going to be out, but I'm hoping
Yeah, let me know.
early mid May. But either way, you can
Okay.
just
So the St. James Joy block party is already going to pass. But
when is that? That's April. Yeah,
April
yeah.
27th. Yeah, I'm doing that. Playing in Philly at my party Law's Lair, which is like an extension of a radio show that I'm bringing back, which has a lot of the more like the music sensibilities that I've kind of like grown into. That's at Warehouse on Watts, first floor of Warehouse on Watts on May 18th with myself, another DJ Yolo Ono, and Jaber. And I'm playing Public Records on, was it May 27th?
Oh, okay.
For
damn, I won't be here.
yeah, it's for Fool's Gold, for our Fool's Gold residency.
Okay. Did you have it last year the same time?
We did,
because I feel like I've been missing it every time.
Yeah, we did a couple. We did one with Mark Ronson, did one with DJ Shadow. I can't say who's doing this one, but it'll probably be out. I'll tell you out.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's that. And then I have an EP coming out with my homie Matsu, who's part of Slow Roast Records. EP's called Pressure. First single's coming out May 3rd, and that's coming out on Fool's Gold. So that'll be my first original release on the label. I've done remixes and stuff on the label, but yeah, it'll be my first. That's another thing that's cool about working at the label, is that since I also make music, I can also put stuff out on the label.
Oh, for sure. And then there's your Bandcamp, and do you have a website?
Oh yeah.
Or your Instagram?
I need to update my website, but yeah, it's MatthewLawOfficial.bandcamp.com or whatever, and it's the same for Instagram.
Same for Instagram.
Matthew Law Official, yeah. And like if you go to my Instagram, you'll find all my links there. That's always the easiest.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And is there anything, or maybe more than one thing that I know we can talk all day, but that you would like to, I guess I can say, get off your chest at this moment in time? Or is there something that I haven't asked you about, but you really wanted to speak on, or haven't explained enough, or I didn't ask the right questions? It's just it's not like goodbye, but
no,
more so.
I think you asked all the right questions. I think that I just am a walking run-on sentence, so it's kind of hard for me to put it all together. I'm really happy that Ladies of Hip Hop still exists. I'm really happy
can we?
Oh,
at this point, because we have to talk about our Philly connection. You talk about it. I keep talking about it all the time.
Well, who were you going to mention? We're going to mention
Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah.
Michelle Bird McPhee.
Huge shout out to her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's an Illvibe Connect. I know her because of her son growing up with Sonny's son.
Right.
Like it's really a connect on that tip. But just more space for women and people of color, and all the like inclusion means
This
something.
Ladies of Hip Hop is having a 20-year anniversary
That's
this year,
amazing.
by the way.
Yeah, that's really dope. That's as long as
That's
I've been DJing.
July 14th, by the way.
Yeah, July 14th.
July 14th is the battle. It's going to be the whole week. But if you want to know more about it, it's at Ladies of Hip Hop on Instagram and ladiesofhiphop.com. This company right here, people think I'm sponsored. I am not, my friends, right? There's no payments involved. However, I am able to use the space, so I'm very grateful. But Snipes, yeah, they're based in Philly, so there you go. See,
there you go.
it's all Philly, all day.
Philly.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I thank you again for coming and taking the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll see you either in the neighborhood, because that
true.
happens more than
I'm about to say, right up on Green. Yep.
Or at one of the parties at some point.
For sure.
Anywhere. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, did I say where you can listen to this podcast? At this point, you should know Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And all the clicks, I should say, comment, likes, subscriptions are all very appreciated. Thank you. Goodbye.